Good morning where I'm from. How's everyone else doing today? I have a very special guest today. I'm looking forward to talking to Phil. And so Phil, as many of you know, is a legend and people absolutely adore him, and rightfully so. If you don't know who I am, my name is Brad. I am a life coach. I help people through deconstructing and helping reach their goals as they continue to deconstruct and move on from life. And so I'm here with the opportunity to interview Phil, and I cannot wait for him to log on and for us to get started. Let me light my pipe here. Hey, Tank Top. I love that your name is Your Tank Top Friend, considering that you're already assumed to be a friend. So I love that. I hope you're doing well this morning. Assuming it is morning. It is morning there for you. So for Phil, it is the afternoon. So I'll wait for him to kind of hop on here, and we'll go ahead and get started as soon as he hops on. Good. There he is. I see Phil waving now, so I waved at him, I should say, and he'll hopefully join here quickly. No rush. I've been looking forward to this interview for a very long time. Very much so. All right, he's asked to join. Hey, Phil.
Hey.
How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing good, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. You know, I completely forgot that you were overseas.
Yeah,
I apologize about that.
fine. No problem.
But I want to thank you for taking the time to talk.
Yeah, no, it's a privilege. I'm excited.
Well, very good. We're going to wait for a few more people to join on here, but I know we've already got comments in the comment section of how he's a legend, he's amazing, all those kinds of things. So it seems as though everyone else agrees with me as well. So I'm thankful for that.
I'll definitely take those comments all day.
Yeah. How are you doing today?
Yeah,
Like,
good. So it's a bit later in the day for me. So yeah, I've just been chipping away at different things. Yeah, it's been a good day.
very good. Is it sunny, cloudy, rainy?
It's been we've had really, really good weather in the UK for quite a while now, a couple of weeks, which is really rare. But today's been a bit miserable. So, but I can't complain. I certainly can't complain. Yeah, it's pretty good.
Very good. Very good. Well, listen,
Where
I really wanted, for any of my followers that are not following you, I wanted to make sure they at least know that you're there, right? And because I don't want them to miss the incredible information content you put out as well. And so, will you do me a quick favor? Although probably everybody knows you, would you just kind of give a brief introduction about yourself?
Sure, yeah. So I am someone that helps people as they deconstruct. I don't offer a particular path, destination, anything like that. I conduct research into the area of deconstruction. I help create space for people to process as they deconstruct, both privately and publicly. Have a podcast, have different resources out there, help create a network that helps people find others locally that are deconstructing, because it can be very isolating and lonely doing this journey. That's basically what I do. Yeah.
Yeah, I tell
But
you,
Instagram is the best place to find me generally if you want to connect with me. So yeah.
I love your webpage. I love the fact that you have started or have something for people to find other people hopefully nearby, or be able to connect with people. Because I know when I was going through deconstructing, it was difficult to find anybody
Yeah.
that was doing that. So I love that. So tell me a little bit about your religious background.
Sure. So I was a pastor's kid, so very, very Christian upbringing. That can look different for different people, of course. And actually, is a way higher percentage of people that deconstruct are pastors' kids than the general Christian populace. But yeah, I've had a relatively good upbringing. My parents were pretty cool, relatively chill. My dad's maybe a little bit more fundamental than my mom was, but on the whole, very fortunate in the upbringing I had. It was still quite fundamental, purity culture, lots of things like that. But I definitely, talking with hundreds of people a week, I've seen a lot worse. Let's put it that way. Yeah, I grew up I started a business, and then I ultimately left that and I just got more and more radical in my faith, more fundamental. I started traveling around the world speaking, doing conferences, speaking in Bible colleges, Bible schools, universities, things like that. Doing Christian conferences, visiting at churches, and really all over the place, doing the typical white straight guy thing in the Christian space. And the more I did that, the more I realized, wow, there are a lot of people in these churches that have big questions that are terrified to ask anyone except for someone that comes in and is a complete anonymous stranger. He's not going to tell my pastor I've got questions. He's not going to tell my partner that I'm doubting. He's not going to, even if he laughs in my face, I'll never see him again. He just gave a terribly shit message, so he's not coming back next time. And, I was a safe space for people. And the more I realized that these people had questions, I had long deconstructed. I was just kind of trapped in this system of like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do at this point. So I basically went around kind of teaching quite covert deconstruction messages, trying to help people start asking the right questions anyway. But the more I thought about it, the more I was like, you know what? There's 110,000 people in people's churches that want to help them when they're completely content with their faith. But there's very few people that are someone you can actually access as a safe person as you deconstruct. Certainly back then, it was 8 years ago, 12 years ago, I don't know, a while back. Maybe people had certain names, someone like, a progressive Christian like Brian McLaren, or maybe someone that got completely off the wall. You go, oh yeah, like a Rob Bell, he's gone a bit crazy or whatever. But you couldn't text Brian McLaren or Rob Bell and ask them a question, or and there wasn't a big group of people online that were overtly doing this process of deconstruction. You could maybe go and find like an atheist group or an agnostic group, but most people that deconstruct don't know what they are for a long period of time. They don't know how to identify or what they identify as. And the thought of identifying as something very clear-cut, not Christian, is terrifying. The thought of identifying as Christian is scary. So, yeah, I think it just became quite apparent that there was a need for people to have a safe space to process, to vent, to be terrified while someone held their hand and said, yeah, this is terrifying. And not judge, not give direction, but just go, yeah, yeah.
I totally agree with that, because I started, without even knowing what to call it, deconstructing probably about 2004, right? And you're right, Rob Bell was probably about as skewy as you get, right? Like one of those progressive people that's gone off the deep end. And so not until, a few years ago did I find people on IG even talk through things, right? So, but I totally understand. It's like I was a pastor for about 25 years. And so when I was deconstructing, doing that, I had no one to talk to. I mean, there was no one, especially, as a pastor.
Yeah, even more so.
Go. If you want to get fired quick, bring up those kinds of questions, right? Yeah. So when did you, what was there a breaking point? Was there a series of things that came about that you thought, oh yeah, I'm not so sure about this? And
yeah. So generally, I try and not talk too much about my own personal journey, because I personally find it a bit of an ethical taboo. But yeah, I think just like everyone else, there's a myriad of different things. I think it's very hard for most people to put their finger on a particular thing and go, that was it. And even if they do, it probably wasn't it. There's probably a whole backstory of little niggles along the way. And that was the case for me. And the data shores up. We've done research into this, but people don't deconstruct over one event or one theology. They deconstruct over a myriad of things. It's an avalanche. Maybe there was a couple of things that sort of trigger it. Maybe the loss of a loved one, maybe cancer, maybe you get sick, maybe you are hurt by the church. Maybe, the church goes rogue and becomes a QAnon church or something, something really wild. Or maybe you start reading your Bible and you see, oh, wait, did God just sanction rape after the genocide and infanticide? That feels not okay. But most people, that's not going to immediately end their faith overnight. There's going to be a whole process after that of questioning, exploring. And that was my journey, and it's generally the journey for most people that deconstruct. Yeah.
So what is in your opinion, in all the people you've helped, what has been the biggest challenge for people, if there is one, in escaping purity culture?
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of different components. I think it's going to be different depending on your own personal gender. So, depending on how you identified within the church, that's going to be different. Obviously, there's a lot more components for those that identify as women than those that identify as male. But there's a whole host of different things that men go through that women didn't because of purity culture, and so it's going to look quite different for different people. But I think on the whole, it's dismantling these big, swathing topics of patriarchy, of, treating women and children as possessions, seeing yourself as a possession, basing our worldviews off of very, very ancient ideologies, and starting to unravel the fact that it doesn't really matter who you were if you go far enough back. Pretty much everyone treated a woman as possession, and therefore, even in the best religion, you probably had this idea. And so 2,000 years later, do we need to still have an idea rooted in women are possession? Or do we have to have an idea rooted in we need to make sure a child grows up with the right dad or something, so we can't possibly have a woman have a sex? It's like, we got condoms now and good preventative medicine and, preventive contraception and stuff. We don't need to do the same things that we had to do thousands of years ago. And that's viewing it all through the best of intentions, which is probably very generous anyway. But yeah, I think it's hard for people when you grow up fundamentally. You grow up with the Bible as an authority. You grow up with mothers, fathers, spiritual mothers and fathers, pastors, and they're all telling you this is the way and this is what God wants. Most people that deconstruct don't lose God overnight. They might start questioning something like purity culture, but they're still going, oh, but God wants this, God wants that. Just seeing Jody say hi. Hi, Jody. I've known Jody for, gosh, like 15 years ago or something. I think I met her 12 years ago, something like that. But people really struggle because it isn't a before and after black and white kind of transition. There's these big, long processes where maybe they let go of certain things. Maybe they let go as the Bible as an authority, but they still kind of look at the church as a traditional body that holds authority and go, well, the church has always done this, so it probably is right, though. Or maybe vice versa. Maybe they start to question the church and go, what is this crazy institution that's gathering money, that's hiding sexual abuse scandals and moving pastors on from church to church rather than, reporting to the authorities? Like, I can't get behind this, but I still believe the Bible is inerrant, and I still believe God has commanded this X, Y, and Z law. And so it's really complex as you're starting to unravel, because, yeah, you don't just rip out everything and hold nothing. And often, the data shows up that about 25 to 30% of people that deconstruct long term still identify as Christian, which is fascinating to me, because I know a lot of people that might say, oh, I follow the way of Jesus, or I kind of like Jesus and kind of like live like according to some of his ideologies, but they would hate to be identified as Christian. But 25 to 30% of people that deconstruct identify as Christian. And so there's a significant portion of people there that are still wrestling with some of these concepts of what does Jesus mean to me today? What is God, and what does that mean to my religion? And they are going to be more prone to have complex unraveling for something like purity culture than someone that becomes an atheist who doesn't give a crap what the Bible says and doesn't believe God is up there going, well, I really care if you masturbate to porn, or I really care if you have sex before marriage, or if you have the same sex. An atheist isn't going to worry about that as much as someone still wrestling with a lot of these spiritual topics. But the vast majority of people don't become atheist or Christian. They sit there in the amorphous unknown for a very long time. And that's often even harder, right? Because you don't know how to figure out what's right and wrong. And you have to do that on your own back. And even that is hard, right? We've been told we're not to be trusted. We have to trust authorities or the Bible or something else. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry.
you totally.
Ramble answer.
No, you nailed it. The majority of my clientele or people I've worked with, you're right. They don't bounce out of spirituality real fast, right? I mean, I have no destination for them. It's wherever they want to end up, be the real them, right? Their real selves. But I find that you're right. They still hold on to God or something that may be God, the universe, or some sort of spirituality, and may still identify as Christian, just a totally different kind of Christian, if you will, right? So I see that a lot with my clients, which is fine. Not often do I have someone that burns it all to the ground right away.
Right.
right? Just, and nor would I recommend that at all, right? Because
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure some people do, and maybe it's the healthiest for some people. But I think on the whole, we have to process our questions and explore them and figure it out, right? I mean, that's life. It's part of growing up.
it's hard work, right? I mean, it takes effort, it takes work, and it's not always an everyday thing. They'll take months off sometimes just to sit with what they're thinking about, and just they can't go any further, right? They just gotta internalize this and figure it out for themselves, and then they can move. So you're right. It's a process that I like to think of it like the naked pastor. When I interviewed him, he described it as deconstruction is more of a growth, right? You're growing up and through something more than tearing something down. And he and I were talking, and he was talking about, and he made it such a beautiful image of hey, you're not in shambles, right? You're not broken in a sense, right? You're growing, and growth hurts,
Hmm.
right? Like exercising a muscle, that hurts at times, but it's beautiful in the end. And so I love that analogy. And so I totally agree with what you were saying with that. And just the time aspect. I mean, it took me years to figure it out.
Yeah.
Years. And finally, what happened for me, which was the final straw amongst a bunch of straws, was the fact that my daughter came out of the closet when she was 11. Well, you and I both know if you're a pastor and you have a daughter that comes out of the closet, your people are screaming, "Hey, what are you going to do? Can we fix her?" And I was like, I don't think my daughter needs to be fixed.
Yeah.
And obviously, if I'm believing this, I'm not, they wanted me to choose between the church and my daughter. And I said, well, bye.
Yeah.
And that's a whole nother deconstruction, right, that takes place. So I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
That.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's important that we understand. I think what most people don't understand is that deconstruction is um, it's a term that we just throw around attached to this idea of losing and evolving faith. Um, but really, what it looks like under the surface, if you talk to someone that's in psychological development theory, like in that branch of psychology where they look at how humans develop and how they grow, um, most of them will go, "Oh yeah, this is this stage of development psychologically. You're moving away from a conventional way of seeing the world, of looking to authority figures to find safety, certainty, and security. You're starting to see the world as somewhere where you have a bit more autonomy, where you have agency, where you look to, you maybe still have authority figures, but you decide who's an authority, and you're going to probably apply authority much more specifically. You're going to look at a medical issue and go, maybe I'll go ask a doctor. And you'll look at a economic issue and ask an economics expert. You're not going to ask your pastor about those things. You might look at spiritual. So you're growing and you're evolving in these ways, and that's a normal, healthy way to grow as a human. And we see that whether you have faith or not. We see that in young children. Children from the age of sort of 6, 7 through to probably about 11 or so generally are at the stage of having conventional worldview. They look for black and white answers from a parent, from the world, from his textbook, from the teacher. But as they hit sort of early teens, they start to question that. They find more of independence, right? They come out. All these things start to happen, and that's healthy development. We wouldn't look at a child moving from that stage to the next stage and go, "Oh, they're broken." But the problem with religion is religion thrives on people staying at these kind of early stages of development and trying to stunt them developing in certain areas of their life. Because the problem with religion is when religion ideologizes these views that were based in a very primitive time when most people were at a very early stage of development and they never got to very late stage development. The society didn't allow for that. It was very limited in what we could evolve to. What it does is it idealizes the past. And so what you see Christians looking to the past as the direction they want to move. You see that with the recent decision with Roe v. Wade in America. The idealized society is one where we look back to when it was like this. And what the problem with it is that it then sees they have the answer, and the answer is in the past. At best, we're conserving where we are. At worst, we're trying to move everyone back to where we want to go. But deconstruction does neither. Deconstruction does not stay still. It does not move backwards. It moves forwards. And this is where the church screams and shouts and gets scared, is you're moving into something I have no idea what it is, and it isn't this past, but they can't label that as a progression, so they see it as
Right.
a recall. So they see it as people backsliding or falling away or whatever. But we're constantly in that war, and I think this is why deconstruction is so specific and important for people in the faith when it happens to their faith. Because it'll happen in loads of areas. Like it happens to the kids, stops believing their parents tell them about Santa Claus, and they go, mom and dad are a bit shit sometimes. So I'm not going to trust them all the time. Right? That's healthy growth. But as we start to do that with our pastor, and go, the pastor's full of shit sometimes, and I'm not going to believe them all the time either. That is huge area of psychological development, and it's important, but it's hard. Think about when you were a teenager and you started to realize that your teachers didn't know everything and your parents didn't know everything, and actually these politicians in charge of the world, they're screwing the world up, and I'm not sure what's actually happening right now, and I'm terrified. It's a scary time. It's a scary
It
time
is.
when you, wait, I have to make decisions on my own, and actually I think I might be able to make decisions better myself. You're probably going to make a lot of mistakes. Well, as a teenager, as someone who's deconstructing all these different things, it's scary, uncharted territory, but it's also exciting and important territory. And it's also a path to the next stage of growth as well. You will continue to move forward, and at some point, you will deconstruct your deconstruction, right? So you will deconstruct a certain way of seeing things where you're autonomous to a fault, or maybe you don't trust authority figures to a fault, or something. You know, you start to go, oh, actually, maybe there's a better way to, a more nuanced way to see life, and there'll be more growth. But I think growth is a fantastic way to put it, and I think you'll see that most psychologists that look at that look at deconstruction will point straight to developmental theory again and again and again, because this has been mapped out for over the last sort of 80 years in psychology. It's seen in every culture and every background. We see people going through these stages of growth.
I'm going to get to a comment here, and then I'm gonna agree with you 100% again. All right. So, Jody said, "I have a transgender daughter and was a pastor. Grateful for your choice. So many children are hurt." Um, and I, as being a family life pastor at one point in my life, I saw what the church does to children. All right. And that was towards the end of my deconstruction, right? Or like launching off and away from the church, I should say. And so I saw that they put the fear into them. They tell them what to believe, or if they don't believe that, they're going to be without their families in heaven. That they're bad, that because they're bad, somebody died for them. You know, the whole brainwashing type avenue. And those children never really, if they stay in the Christian circles, literally never learn to critically think. Unless they're allowed to think within this box, as long as they always end up back in the box, right? And so when you talked about people getting on and saying, oh, I can make decisions, I think one of the big struggles that people have been deconstructing have is trusting themselves to make those decisions, right?
Yeah.
Learning how to say, my decision is valid, my decision is worth it, and I can do this. I don't have to rely on somebody else to tell me how to do this, right? And I think that when you look in America and you look at the conservative right, it's just a political shitstorm. Especially when you talk about Roe versus Wade, it was never an issue in the 70s or
Right.
early 70s, right? It became a political issue, and then they jumped on it, right? Yeah. The sanctity of life, whatever the hell that means to a Republican. You know, I totally agree with you that I think because of the internet, there's an awakening and will be an awakening. People going, oh, I have more information now than I ever did before. The church can't hide behind its box and saying just have faith, because there's science out there. There's so many other thoughts out there that they have to literally start thinking for themselves or put their head in the sand.
Yeah. Well, if you look at history, this is a really fascinating correlation almost that you can track. But if you look 500 or so years ago, you have the printing press emerges, and you have Martin Luther rocks up and starts questioning the Catholic Church. And he goes, not sure about a lot of these practices. He was still very passionate in his faith. In fact, he wanted to reform the Catholic Church. He didn't want to start a new wing or anything. But he managed through the printing press to critique the Catholic Church and started really vocally speaking out. He's putting out leaflets everywhere, and people are learning to read. They're able to access reading material easily because we can print these. The common people can print something and distribute. It's not some scribe having to write it down hundreds and hundreds of times. And so what you saw was it was a Reformation, right? It's the Reformation. And you saw the birth of a new branch of Christianity that is now a huge percentage of Christians around the world. Better or worse, I guess the jury's out on that one. But I think in some ways it probably became a bit better. In other ways, it probably became much worse. In a lot of ways, it's exactly the same. But the fascinating component is it was a new technology that it gave people information. Off of the back of the Reformation, we have the Enlightenment, we have modern science, we have medicine, we have all these incredible breakthroughs in the West. Specifically, we're talking about the Western world here because you have to recognize indigenous cultures and different parts of the world are totally on a different time frame when we talk about history and work their own journeys of spirituality, history, all that stuff, as we go and colonize them all as well around this time. But what you see today is a very similar thing. You see the internet is a new technology that people are suddenly able to access. If you look at Europe, Europe largely went through its deconstruction phase about 70 years ago. Most people in Europe are not Christian. They're Christian from a kind of sociological kind of perspective. Like, oh yeah, our country's kind of based on loose Judeo-Christian values, and my grandparents were Christians, and I might go to a church on Christmas, but and they would say, yeah, I'm a Christian, and they actually are happy with that. Most Christians panic, right? Because that's not a Christian, you're not a real Christian, you know, like. But that's really how most people in Europe identify as a Christian if they are a Christian. The amount that are evangelical, passionate, regular attending Catholics, evangelicals, things like that, it's quite small. But they went through that process without things like that. They had to go to a library to read about it. They had questions. They weren't gonna. Who do you ask? Pastor? No, you could go to a library. Maybe you could learn about it in education, but a lot of education hadn't really caught up yet. Today, you start asking the question. I've talked to youth pastors who have started to deconstruct because their kids that they're teaching, as they're preaching a little sermonette to the youth, and they're talking about maybe purity culture, you shouldn't have sex before marriage, kids right there and then are pulling their phone out saying, does the Bible really say anything about sex before marriage? And it says, it's nowhere in the Bible. And they're going, hey, Pastor Bob, your sermon's bullshit. The Bible doesn't talk about that. And they're like, well, the thing is, we'll go talk to the pastor about that. You know, but they're starting to deconstruct because their kids just have better access to information than they had growing up going to seminary. And I think we're seeing an incredible time where people are going to deconstruct whether you like it or not. People are asking questions and finding answers whether you like it or not. There's pros and cons to that, right? You get all sorts of crazy quacks that believe anything they read on the internet and stuff. But generally speaking, around the topic of faith, people are diving into these some questions. There's some fantastic resources out there, and there is a lot more decent, hard work, scholar work made accessible. You know, people like the Bart Ehrmans of the world are breaking down complex stuff, making it really accessible to people, putting out a blog, putting out a podcast, putting out a book. That stuff is like at everyone's fingertips. I talk to young teens sometimes, and I'm like, they're in fundamental families, they go to fundamental church, they're homeschooled, and I'm like, man, like, how are you talking to me? And they're like, dude, my parents would not let me talk to an atheist in my life, but they let me online, the idiots. I'm raised by YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. That is my bread and butter, and I am not a homophobe. I am not going to be weird about someone being trans. I am not going to look at atheists as a second-class citizen. And actually, I recognize a lot of what my parents teach me is bullshit. Now, obviously, a lot of people in that culture don't get access to the internet at all. But the point being, if you just give a kid access to the internet, and you're fucked as far as controlling them. It's not going to happen, right? That time is gone. That was the model for many years, is we do everything we can to control our kids. Like what you were saying, you know, most parents look at their kids as property, as if they would say property today, no way would anyone say that. Maybe some, and I really am terrified of that person. But most wouldn't say property, but they recognize, oh, this child they represent my spiritual headship. You know, if my child isn't a Christian anymore, or they're gay, well, it says something about my faith. And you know, they've got so much possession that my kid has to be controlled, manipulated, made to be very certain about this faith and not waver in any way because they're my child. And that doesn't really work. This is why you see kids go to universities and immediately deconstruct, right? Because they've been held so tightly that any slight pressure just shatters the whole thing. It's so brittle. Yeah, anyway.
I think that's why we're seeing the reverse. It's not that, like, for instance, like my mom, when I left Christianity, I haven't heard from her since, right? Because there was no control. I was a disappointment. You know, we're seeing parents leave their kids, right? One of the things your tank top friend mentioned here, the Mormon Church is calling it the Great Apostasy. And I know that, for instance, the Southern Baptists in their handbook consider England an unreached people group.
Yeah.
Which is dumbfounding considering it wasn't too long ago a C.S. Lewis and a whole bunch of bigwigs were there preaching, right? You know, and teaching. But you guys, meaning over there, have questioned and welcomed the questioning, and grown a lot faster than us stubborn-head Americans, even though we are seeing statistically a decline in the church. For the first time, it's under 50% that identify or go to church, right? So that's a good thing, in my opinion.
Ask yourself if that was a good thing.
You know, yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate that historical look into things, because I think you're right. You know, just like you said, when the printing press came out, it opened eyes, right? And it started the questioning. And I feel like the internet for Americans here, especially, is doing the same thing. And people are like, man, do we really agree with what our politicians are doing? You know, why?
I think as well, there's a component with America that's interesting. As a European, so I lived in America for a while, and I've spent a lot of time with Americans. America is a very insular place. It's a huge place, and so it's hard not to be insular, right? When you could be an American and live 3,000 miles away from another American, right? I mean, it's a big place, right? So I get it. Like, you know, you're not spending your whole time going, I wonder what Germans are like, or I wonder what, I've not spent much time with the French, or, you know, of course not, right? Because, geez, it's far, far way away. And honestly, if you want to go on holiday, there's 110 places you can go locally. Locally is still far. But I think America generally can be quite insular in a way that a lot of other parts of the world aren't as well. So, for example, when I'm growing up in Scotland as a kid, I'm surrounded by atheists. I'm surrounded by people from different cultures. I'm surrounded by all sorts of different things in the way that most people in America in a very multicultural city would be. But if you go into the rural heartland of America, maybe none of them have even ever talked to an atheist, right? And they're hearing from their pastor, this is what an atheist is like. This is what a gay person's like. I read a study recently, done by the UK government actually, and they polled, I think it was about 10,000 Americans, and they asked like what percentage of Americans are, and then they filled in the gap. They were things like gay or Muslim, and it was fascinating because the numbers are obscene. Like I think they thought there was one of the answers was they thought, I think it was about 15% of America were transgender, which I thought was astonishing. That's the average American.
Wow.
Is saying 15%. So this is the point, though. If you're living in rural, you've never met anyone that's transgender, but you're seeing it all over the TV, or you're hearing over in New York or in San Francisco, and so you're believing these wild kind of concepts. The worst thing you can do if you're wanting to stoke those wild concepts and keep those wild concepts alive is give your kid a phone with TikTok, right? Because they're immediately going to see transgender people creating content, and they're like me, normal, they're great, they're wonderful. Oh, here's an atheist account. They're cool. Yeah, okay, fine. It kills the perception, and this is how this is great. How great atrocities happen, right? The perception is Hitler can kill a whole bunch of Jews because we created this horrifying narrative about Jews. and people accept it, right? And so we turn the eye. Now, that's an extreme, horrifying example of what that looks like. Or we can create a narrative about black people and do that with slavery for a very long time, and largely, in part, still very alive in different forms and similar forms today. So we do this in different ways, but I think the church does this tremendously well, or has done tremendously well for many years with things like, oh, gay people. So your son comes out as gay, and this is the first person you ever met in your life that's actually gay, and you're like, oh, either that's a breaker moment, right? You're either going to roll with your kids or you are disowning your kids. And I along with Jody, like, I'm like, thank you for being making the right choice, being a great parent. But you and I know, I'm sure we've talked to a lot of people that have witnessed firsthand their parents make the wrong choice and have not talked to their parents for decades. And so the narrative is strong if we can isolate people from their neighbor. And I think that's the beauty of the internet as well, is it's breaking down those barriers. We're meeting people. Our kids are being raised by atheists and transgender people and people from Australia or from Kenya. You know, they're all over the world. They're being exposed to people and they go, oh, you're like me, right? I mean, any moment I see someone that's radically different online, and you just share that moment of common humanity, right? You laugh at the same thing, or something happens and you're like, I'm laughing exactly the same way as this group of guys from I don't know, Nicaragua, because one of them just got a prank done on them, and I'm like, that's exactly how me and my brothers would do it. Like, and it's like suddenly I am a brother to this Nicaraguan person that if I go back a couple hundred years ago, my family would have hated Nicaraguans and, you know, wouldn't even probably know where Nicaragua was, you know, like, but suddenly they're my brothers, they're my sisters. And I think that is the power of the internet, and that causes deconstruction powerfully, because you don't get to buy the hate anymore. You don't believe the lie of atheists are evil, or gay people are just degenerate, horrible, evil people. And it's like, some of these gay people have better morals than you, Mom. You know, like, come on. Yeah, I love it. Love the internet for that. And I think the internet can stoke all that hateful stuff as well, of course. But right.
Yeah, it's interesting because you're right. It's like, you know, when I left the church, I found that people in the LGBTQ plus community were amazing and wonderful, right? And just fantastic people, and that I'd been lied to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, or an atheist. I always thought, oh, atheists are out there eating babies, you know, sacrificing babies to Satan or somebody, right? I mean, and then the Satanism. Of course, I grew up in the 80s, right? So growing up in the 80s, yeah, burning in hell and fire and brimstone and all that kind of stuff. So my idea of even rock and roll, everything was kind of warped from those kinds of teachings. But what I fear for people in America is the propaganda that, you know, that Trump uses or whatever have you, that spouts a lie. And just like, pardon me, and it's nothing like Hitler, but his propaganda was similar. And it's saying to spout a lie about the Jews over and over again until people believe it. Mm-hmm. Right? And I've seen Trump and the administration try to continue to do that after all these years. And I'm hoping that people don't buy into it for the next election, because I really am worried about the next election. Yeah. I'm worried about that. But hopefully the younger generation that's grown up with the internet and has done research and learning, when they vote, it will make a difference, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, I'm so empathetic because I get so discouraged by how low voting is in younger people. I get really frustrated and discouraged. But I also am like, you know what? Yeah, I get it. Because we voted for both sides of the party over the last 40 years. And you can look back and go, wow, these people are just the worst. Like, you know, right? I mean, let's be honest. I mean, Biden or Trump, give me Biden every day, absolutely. And even if not Biden, what he, like, the background of what he represents, Democrats are moving for. They're at least not there. You know, there's the picture of the is it the plane, the military plane that's dropping a bomb, and they've painted like a pride thing on the wing or something. You know, it's like bombing, but LGBT plus affirming. It's like, of course, this is so broken, and I get that as well. And it must be so frustrating for younger people to look at this and go, what the fuck are these older people smoking? What are they doing? Why have they got this two-party system? Why have they got judges that aren't even democratically voted for? Why? Like, I can't imagine. I mean, in some ways, I have grown up in this world because I think the world I've inherited is absolutely insane. But yeah, I feel for people. But I think what gives me hope, as much as I can have hope, and I spent most of this weekend just feeling sick, if I'm honest. And I'm over in the UK, and I'm a guy, and I got lists and lists of privilege here as far as how the last decision affects me, right? I mean, it really, right. I am so privileged it doesn't even bear mentioning, and I've been so upset. But so I say that with great sensitivity when I say something gives me hope, because I think there's a place to be hopeless, and it's important to feel hopeless. It's important to feel that. I think that has to be felt before we see change. But I am encouraged by the fact that the raw data shows me that the vast majority, not even a slight majority, the vast majority of Americans didn't want to overturn Roe v. Wade. The vast majority, 67% of Christians didn't want to overturn Roe v. Wade. So if anything gives me hope, what it is if we can burn this fucking system down and actually start getting our way, the majority rule here, right? And how much that's doable, right? The 99% don't tend to overturn the 1%, right? So I'm not that filled with hope, but I have a little hope that we do want change, right? The vast majority of us want a better world for our kids. The vast majority of us want to look after the earth and not burn fossil fuels. The vast majority of us want healthcare for all. The vast majority of us want to make sure our kids are safe in schools and they're not going to get shot. That's a common vast majority stat. Even in America, things like more gun control laws is a majority of people. Majority want that. And so I think it's so hopeless and discouraging that that's not represented by the people you vote for. And I can see why young people are like, well, what's the point in voting? I get that as well. But I do have a bit of hope somewhere that if we can burn the system down, and I don't know, I'm a bit of an anarchist, so maybe we just start setting fire to buildings. We start with the White House. But I don't know. Right? But if somehow we can break the system, okay. I think public property is what we all want to protect, the powerful. If we break the system, I think we can get what we want. I think there is a better world out there. Look at Europe, right? We didn't have a lot of these things. Most people in Europe have employed better gun control. We have healthcare for all in most of the countries in Europe. We have free education. We don't have crippling debts. Sorry, I used the word crippling. But we don't have these huge, awful debts weighing down every person in society, so they are stuck working horrific minimum wage jobs that is basically an admission. Minimum wage is just an admission that if they could, they would pay you less, right? Like a minimum job, literally a company saying, if we could, we would pay you nothing. Like we do not value at all, right? And people are entrapped in these systems, and it's okay to feel hopeless in that. I think it is a hopeless situation for a lot of people. I don't know, a bit of a political rant maybe, I don't know, but from across the pond, I'm with you all, and I grieve with you all, and I'm frustrated with you all, and I mean, if I lived there, I would burn it down with you all as well. I really would. However that looked, but
I am hoping that my children have walked down the stairs after watching something and gone, what the hell's wrong with this country? I want to move or something, right? I mean, that they're passionate about it. I'm excited to see.
Yeah, it's exciting. You cannot fault. They might not vote, but they are passionate. And I think maybe if we can apply it to voting, maybe things change. Maybe not applying it to voting and being passionate in other ways that radically shift things is the way to go. I don't know. I'm not going to tell the next generation how to live the world. If anything, I think that's the last thing they need. If anything, I think we all need to sit back and go, maybe we listen to some people that are going to have to live for 100 years rather than people that have got 20 years left and don't give a fuck, right? Because let's be honest, that's charge, right?
every time my child said, "What are these old fogies doing in office?" They're not in touch with reality.
No.
Uh,
Step one, stop voting for people that might die if they fall over. Like that's not good, right? I feel pain in a way I don't feel before, but there is zero chance I'm gonna die if I just trip over. But like most of the last few presidents, we are like, oof, not good. Do not fall. Why have we put that guy on a bike, right? I mean, you see things like that and you're like, oh, that's terrifying. Why is our who wants the leader of their country to be someone that if they're on a bike, everyone's going, oh God, this isn't it's risky. A good thing. Your president should be able to go on a bike ride without people panicking. Like, that's that right? Jesus, you should be worried about like assassination, not about a guy like slipping on a bike. Jesus, God. I just man, and you know, I say all this, and the UK is a shit show as well. We're the worst. In Europe, we are doing everything we can to move as far backwards in history as we can. So, you know, I say it as a person fueled with frustration about my own situation here as well. Yeah. We should all move to Norway.
I'm thinking about it. I've been to Scotland, and I do love Scotland.
If Scotland gets independence, I'm in England right now. I'm going back to Scotland to tell you.
Yeah, my plans there, so I would definitely go. My wife and I would love to move back there. The Isle of Skye is the most beautiful place I've ever seen. So, okay, so we're past the 45-minute mark. I want to make sure everybody knows that follows me that may not follow you or may just happen to log on here. What's the best way to follow you, connect with you? Plug yourself, my friend.
Here on Instagram, find me. I'm Phil Drysdale. You can click the name if you've somehow managed the story without knowing how to work Instagram. Message me, DM me. I'm always around to chat, to process, to help in any way I can. I post stuff every day here. If you go on the link in my bio, you can find some of our research. You can find the Deconstruction Network, which helps people connect with other people in their area that are deconstructing. You can find my podcast, YouTube videos, resources. Everything I do is free. So yeah, there's no plug there to try and steal your money or get. Like I said, I'm an anarchist. I don't believe in the transfer of money. So yeah, go for it. Enjoy yourself.
Phil, I can't thank you enough. Thank you for your wisdom, your insight. Love you. Love your page, content, everything, man. Really appreciate it.
Really fun.
All right. You have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, you too. All right. Love you, man.
Love you. Bye-bye.